It's harder to do that, to say it.
Easiest said than done. Stream there that follows that.
Watch against the board. Try to boom now.
I remember you making a comment like a year ago or so.
Oh, it did. It was like my first reaction was.
Yes, please. Yes. I'm Rachel, my mom, I'm trying to remember everybody. I didn't say that. I'm on the Boston. Yes. Yeah. No, just the red building was that where that whole sections were up. Over there, so. Yeah, if the water gets to my house, we're all in front of it. Yeah, ours was 35 minutes, so. Yeah. I couldn't, I came down into town. And then I went all the way back up. 5. We got on the interstate to come all the way down here to come to Burt for 4 or 5 days before it was open. This is close by the mall. Oh, yes, yep, up through a village. Yes.
It was the last birthday where the Armory sale.
Yeah.
I didn't know if the name of that.
No. I'm gonna go sit up there.
Couldn't help it, Dan. All around the place.
Anything actually Brett was lost when you see me. He came up to me after a little while and said, well, you see you still working cheers. Some habits are happening. That's right. After 24 and a half years of
No, I didn't. I'm right on the top. Yes. No, okay, yes.
John.
I know, I had it on. Well, I went to Montpelier, and then I made one trip out to Nochdando, and I took I haven't gone to that side.
Mom, you're already on the next one.
Oh, yeah. I know, I can drive faster.
Good bring, good.
Recording in progress.
Welcome everyone to the second public information meeting for the Armory bond vote, and I invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United bond vote. If you're here immediately after or 6 p.m., whichever is first, we'll have our select board meeting. If you have an issue that is not about the Armory, you should wait until the public comment of the select board. So, and with that, I just want to remind folks, we have a presentation. Joe and some of the contractors will be joining him. We're going to hold questions until after the presentation so we don't go down certain rabbit holes. So with that, Joe, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you and welcome. My name is Joe Kasperzak. I'm the assistant town manager for St. John's Prairie. And tonight we're talking about the Armory Project, and I'm going to provide a little bit of background about the project. We're going to have a presentation. We're going to walk through some of the elements of this project. We've got a team here that we've been working with. We've got David Roy from Lehman Landfair here. He's our architect and engineering. We have Chris Yando from Engelberth Construction, our construction management friends. We also have Joe Wythe, I believe, online from White & Burke Real Estate Advisors, and Kevin Ignazak from Montrose Environmental. So just quickly, how did we get here? Well, I've been working on this Armory project since 2015. Before that, I think was when I started seeing environmental reports and structural engineering reports shortly after 2009, when they shuttered the building, which ultimately created a lot of decay from cracked floor drains. So the building for 16 years now has been exposed to the elements. And if I showed you the pictures before they got in there to do the remediation, you would see basically ceilings and walls crumbling all the way from the roof down to the basement. At times we even went in with some state environmental folks, and there was about 1.5 inches of ice throughout the whole basement. Basically, how we got here, well, we reviewed multiple opportunities over the last 10 years for redevelopment of this project. We've looked at housing development projects, we've looked at community projects, we've had developers, private developers looking for manufacturing in this particular plant. We had the History and Heritage Center that actually made quite a bit of progress until they really uncovered the true issues with this particular building, and that was the PCB contamination, primarily in the paints. We've hired consultants, we've received grants to do some studies and feasibility studies, and then ultimately through a process of trying to identify a use for this, it was determined that really there was no utility, there was nobody coming forward. In fact, before Chad and I started, the town manager put out an RFP to try to attract some development there, and the building was listed for $1 for interested parties, and there were no takers. So ultimately, we've got a real problem piece of real estate here that's been studied, which also restricts some opportunities for development or redevelopment. The opportunity to tear the building down does not exist in this day and age. There has been too much assessment and historic review. So this building, it's not on the historic registry, but it is listed as a significant component of our historic downtown district up on Main Street. So the town really did not have a lot of options here, and so we knew that we needed new fire, and we knew we needed new police facilities, been long overdue. And so then we started to look at this and say, okay, can we take this blighted, vacant, contaminated property and maybe repurpose it to solve one of those needs? And it was determined that it would not be a suitable fire station. So we looked at basically our police dispatching and emergency operations to see whether we could repurpose this building to serve their needs. And in fact, we have spent the last several years working and reworking different designs and iterations of this. One that we knew would serve the needs of our policing and dispatch and emergency operations, but would also be something that we thought would be a responsible investment. So when I say that, I'm going to flash back 2 years, maybe 2.5 now. This was a $5.8 million project. We have a slide we'll talk about in a little bit, but the reality is, you know, the timing of this, with the timing of COVID and the issues with the supply chain and the availability of contractors have really created a spike in project costs. It is not just the Armory that's experiencing this, and this project went from 5.8 to 6.3 and then to about 11, all in about 12 months, and then it's been bouncing around between, you know, 10 and 13 or 14 as we, as a team, kept reviewing this and kept working with the chiefs and trying to identify how we can best value engineer this, provide what they need, and still deliver the service to the town that is needed here. So basically, that's how we got here. This project is now over $12.5 million, and that is a high number, and we know that. And we'll address that here in detail. Maybe we can go to the next slide, and what I'll do is I'll do my technical requirements of reading the actual warning so that everybody's aware of that. So the bond vote warning reads as follows. The legal voters of the town of St. Johnsbury, Vermont are hereby notified and warned to meet at the town office building at 51 Depot Square in St. Johnsbury, Vermont on Tuesday, June the 3rd, 2025, between the hours of 8 o'clock in the forenoon, at which time the polls open, and 7 o'clock in the afternoon, at which time the polls will close, to vote by Australian ballot upon the following articles of business. And this is referred to as Article 1. Shall general obligation bonds of the town of St. Johnsbury in the amount not to exceed $3,781,873, which is in addition to the $5,400,000 of indebtedness that was approved at a special meeting of the town of St. Johnsbury on September 14th, 2021, such additional indebtedness being subject to reduction from available state and federal grants and aid, be issued for the purpose of financing the cost of making public improvements, namely reconstruction and renovation and conversion of the former Armory for use as a public safety building, the aggregate estimate total cost of such improvements being $12,558,873. The legal voters of the town of St. Johnsbury are further notified that voter qualification, registration, and absentee voting relative to said special meeting shall be as provided in chapters 43, 51, 55 of Title 17 Vermont State Statutes annotated. The legal voters of the town of St. Johnsbury are further notified that an informational meeting will be held on Monday, May 12th, which we have had, and on Tuesday, May 27th, this evening, at 5:30 in the evening, here at the town office building at 51 Depot Square. Adopted and approved at a regular meeting of the Select Board of the town of St. Johnsbury, duly called, noticed, and held on April the 28th, 2025, received for record and recorded in the records of the town of St. Johnsbury on April 29, 2025. And I should just note that, you know, there was a short timeline to get to this bond vote, and we have met all of the legal requirements for warning these meetings and posting these meetings. And mostly the reason for this short time frame is because we waited to get to bid documents. So we had actual bids from contractors, so we knew the numbers, so we would not have to come back to the voters of the town of St. Johnsbury. So it was very important. We had to keep the bids intact for a certain period of time, why we went through this effort to do our due diligence and communicate with our community so that our voters could make a informed decision about how to move forward. So, that being said, I think what we'd like to do is start and talk a little bit about the existing conditions at 1187, which is currently serving our police, dispatch, and fire. And I know Colin Gillespie, he is our director of dispatch. He's here and he's going to walk us through just some visuals of what they're dealing with at this particular building so that we can understand, I think, that there truly is a need for improvements. Oh, is Joel here too?
He's on.
Okay, welcome Joel. So please chime in, Joel, too, with comments.
Like Joe said, I'm Colin Gillespie. In the first picture on the left, that's part of the patrolman's office. It's about half of it. In the corner, you can see the detective's office. I'd say it's maybe a 9x9. In this area, currently we have 7 officers that share that whole area. Fully staffed would be up to 12 officers that would have to share that area. So as you can see, it's kind of tight, limited of space. On the right is the processing room or the fingerprint area. When we have people come in for jobs or whatever, we'll do that in that area. And then you can see the door right here. That's our current holding cell, if you will. There's another picture later on that you'll be able to see, but it is pretty much a closet, which the officers have to handcuff somebody to a wall. There's no bathroom. There's no area for them to wash their hands or anything like that. They have to be handcuffed the whole time they're there. And almost always you have to have somebody supervising them off and on. The one on the left here, that's our lobby. Currently we're trying to update it with our intercom system, our access control areas and stuff like that. The picture on your right is the current captain's office / storage room. We store the officer's equipment in there along with any kind of case files that the captain or the chief have to on the left is the current dispatch center. I've been in public safety, civilian and military, almost 20 years. This is the smallest center I've ever seen. We have a station for 3 different dispatchers in this one area. We also have 2 different alarm monitoring pieces of equipment. This is one of them that have to take up that same space, along with a bunch of our radio equipment. I think this area, I could be wrong, is roughly 14 by 16. But yeah, it's pretty tight for all the equipment they have. Fax and scanning machine. On the right is our current PD dispatch and fire training room. There's a lot of outdated equipment in that area. So this may look just like a regular hallway right here. If you see these closet doors right here, that's because that's exactly what they are. They're just closets. So a normal closet you would have in your house. That's where the officers have to store a lot of their equipment other than the offices upstairs. So they have winter gear, extra uniforms, and other types of equipment in a regular style closet instead of a designated room. At the far end of the hallway is a bathroom that is dual purposed for any employee in the building, and then obviously if the officers have somebody come in that they have in holding, they have to take them down this hallway through the building to that bathroom to use. This is the holding cell I was talking about before. There's just a bench in there, and the light is kind of construing it, but you can see like this black plate right here. That's where the officers have to handcuff anybody that comes in that they have to the wall. So depending on how long they're there, that's where they're handcuffed the whole time, to wait whether they're bailed or cited or if they have to go over to the jail. This is our current EOC. You can usually fit about 7 or 8 people, should only fit 7 or 8 people in there. When we had flooding this summer, Joe and Chad had to fit 12 plus in there to get all the different swift water teams, fire departments and other individuals in there to get in there and try to formulate a plan. This is supposed to be another office, but it's kind of a storage closet, if you will. We have FEMA things from the flood, and then obviously all this is extra equipment and different office equipment. But that's supposed to be somebody's office, but because of the lacking of space, that's what that office is being used as. What's that? Those are Anthony's, I believe, that the fire department used. This is the other side of our training room. As you can see, a lot of it is used for storage. We recently had excess of old equipment that we just cleared out, but that was taking up almost this entire area. A lot of this stuff needs to be updated. What's that? Yeah, it's this piece of equipment right here. But, so the hallway that you saw before, when you come in the building into that lobby, your processing room is on the left. And then that hallway you see is that second door in the lobby. So you have to go all the way down that hallway through another door, and then you have to come into this training room where the breathalyzer is. So you have to go through the building even further to get to the breathalyzer machine. On the right here is the sergeant supervisor's office / another storage room. It's an office for 3 people, including my office. It's also used as a break room for the officers. In the corner you can see some of the supplies. Along this wall there's a bunch of radio equipment and other computer equipment that we store in there because it allows us to quick access to dispatch, but it's triple purposed at the time.
Thanks, Colin. Appreciate it. And I don't know, Joel, if you have any comments before we move on about the existing facility. I don't know if you can hear me.
No, I think he got it all correct.
Good.
We've been holding our meetings with public safety task force. We've got a lot of involvement. Outside public safety agencies, at the state, et cetera. And our consultants have pointed out the inadequacies of the facility, just the way it's situated. If we ever need to bring somebody into the building, you're bringing them across a public sidewalk as you're trying to bring them up a set of stairs. There's been incidences where people have gotten away from our police officers as we're trying to bring them into the buildings. But they also pointed out that just the layout of the facility does hinder us from a recruitment and retention perspective. So when people, and the previous chief has told me this, and same with the current chief, that when they're interviewing applicants and they're in that building, they're more apt to be excited to go to work at a town that has a newer or more workable police station. And then the other piece, but it's more of a reason why Main Street is important, is our response from Main Street. It's a good spot for us to be responding, especially for our schools. Officials from both the town school as well as the academy have represented that the St. Johnsbury's presence responding from Main Street is important to the way they address student safety.
Well, move upstairs. Why can't they move them there if you need to move? There's offices spaced up there, there's a big building over there, why don't they just move them there and give them the room they need? And when you have a meeting like emergency management, you got a lot of people coming, put right here and do it, it'd be plenty of room and stuff there, and set it up, and it would be safe for the schools too. I mean, there's not much further here, you can run right up to them, but what's upstairs that you can't use? Well, you're spending all the money, I mean, you can move them right here, and they got plenty of room.
Yeah, you know, that has been discussed briefly, and I'll say that our welcome center and serving our guests who are visiting our town and the same entryway and the same doors, and bringing, you know, perpetrators to a second floor level through the welcome center and the public transportation center didn't seem to coexist very well. So, I mean, the dynamics of all of that.
Yeah, we're gonna hold questions at the end, so I'm gonna.
Okay.
Like Joe, you'll have.
You know what I'm after, so I'll discuss this later.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, we'll have time too to have those discussions and that input. So right now, I just want to introduce Kevin from Montrose. He's going to talk a little bit about, you know, the remediation. So lucky for St. Johnsbury, we were identified as probably the most complicated project, both remediation and construction in New England this last several years. So hooray to us for that. Kevin and his team though has been with us right along, and he's going to talk a little bit about this phase of the project, and truly amazing actually. Kevin?
Sure. Good evening everyone. Real quick though, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Yeah, as Joe had mentioned, you know, there's been a lot of environmental investigations at this building, and you know, one investigation led to the next, and the PCBs, as Joe had mentioned, become quite problematic. And just to put things in perspective, the EPA cutoff level is 1 part per million, and we were finding PCBs in paint up to 20,000 parts per million. And because of those concentrations, you know, it's considered a very hazardous type waste and substance, and the EPA became heavily involved. And we proceeded to collect literally hundreds of samples to try and demarcate exactly where these higher concentrations of paint existed, and that work paid off huge dividends in terms of being able to dispose of things much cheaper and much cost effective. Just for comparison, hazardous waste, PCBs, it's about 950 tons, $150 per ton dispose of it. And with the work we were able to do, we were able to get rid of it around $250 to $300 per ton. So the work has been largely complete now. I don't know, I'm sure some of you have driven by. You know, the gymnasium's been down, it's backfilled. Along with the materials inside the building, the town is also able to address the superficial soil contaminants outside the building. And these included metals and semi-volatile organic compounds in the front and along the side of the building. And even an area in the back where the loading dock used to be, where the PCBs leached off the paint into their surrounding soils. So we're able to remove all that material as well. The only thing really left to do is pave the roof and then address the residual impacts in the basement here. And here's a kind of a before and after photo here on the left. You can see the different colors of paint, the various debris. 2 weeks ago, Costello actually bead blasted PCB paint off the walls. Those are the foundation walls that have remained. And then we have to take out the concrete slab and then some of the superficial drainage systems below that slab, as well as the remaining interior concrete walls that have PCB. So, but yeah, very successful project. You know, the town should be commended to utilize the funding that is available to bring this project to the state it is, and you know, perform this level of remediation to get it ready for redevelopment and remove this impediment to do so. So well done, guys. So that's it for me, Joe.
Great, thanks. I'm just going to highlight, you know, the cost of the remediation, right? that we know of is just over $2.7 million, and we did procure $2.4 million to help offset the cost of the remediation. So we thought we did a good job uncovering all the different sources. There was an EPA grant, there was a Vermont Community Development Program grant, there was a Vermont Brownfield Revitalization Fund grant, there was a Regional Planning Commission revolving loan funds that were accessed for low interest loans and grants. So it was a lot of work just managing that component of the project itself. So great. And now I think what we're going to do is walk through the site plan and just briefly go over the floor plan so everybody understands how the building works from a footprint point of view and what's inside. I've got David Roy here who's going to do that presentation.
Yep, perfect. Thank you, Joe. Good afternoon, everybody. David Roy with Lehman Lamphere Architects. I've been working together with Joe for many, many years now to develop this. Just going to give you kind of a layout of what we have here. This along here is your Main Street corridor. This is the dentist's office to the south. There's the church building outlined right there, and then there's another church on that side of the property as well. The police department will enter the site here, and there's a secure area of parking for their vehicles, for the patrol vehicles. And on this side here, shared access with the church on this side will provide parking for public access. You can enter the building through the front door, or there's an accessible entrance on this side here, which gets you access to an elevator and a stair in this addition on the building. Let's see. Yeah, we can go to the next one. Yep. These are some elevation views. So we've got obviously the front of the building from the Main Street side. We've got the northern view. This is the side with the parking for public access. And we've got the side on the dentist side of the office here, or dentist office side. And then the back, which is the side that has the patrol parking area, secure parking area. Is there a way to get rid of that band? Yeah, okay. Yeah. If not, it's all right. There you go. Thank you. So as we go through this a little bit, I'd like to point out, I know there's some discussion at the past hearing about shared opportunities for space at a police and fire station. But as we go through this, I kind of want to point out that the needs of the police department are very unique in many respects. So we're going to create that square footage either here or at a different location. And I guess specifically I speak to some of the processing and detention areas. Anyway, we come into the building on the north side. This is where the public access parking was. This is the Main Street side with the stair up to the building. You can come in the handicap entrance here, or you can come in, the patrol officers will use this door to enter and exit the building, or to bring detainees or personnel down into the building. There's a small little entry lobby here, and you can get elevator access to the upper floors or take this stair to get up or down. If you go down, you'll enter this lower level and enter a suspect interview room. There is evidence storage and check-in and logging, and then the evidence room itself. And then these are the detention cells and the processing area where your digital fingerprinting will take place and other things. There's mechanical space here, which is mechanical and electrical. There's a locker space here for the officers and a toilet room for toilet, and then this one has a shower room for use by the patrol officers. Again, many of these spaces are very unique. The processing, suspect interview, evidence storage, all are very unique. We need locker space specific to the fire department. So just keep that in mind. Go ahead. it'd be unique to the police department, yeah. Yep. As you come up the stairs from this vestibule, you can come up the stairs into another elevator lobby and the main lobby of the building. If you go this direction, you'll go into the patrol room space, squad room. And there's a toilet, or there's a little conference room there. And on this side, there is training and emergency operations center. It can be used multi-purpose room, but for any kind of training exercise that's to take place, and some storage. If you go up the stairs, one more flight. This is kind of the public area of the building where people can enter and such. As you go up another flight, this is more of the private use of the police department. There's a dispatch center here, which will be built with 3 dispatch setups and a 4th for future, a total of 4. There's a computer room here, and there's an office for the dispatch manager. There's also a toilet room, which is accessible directly for the people using dispatch, so they don't have to leave the area while on the shift. There's also a kitchenette and some conference spaces kind of in this central area. And then we go in here and there's a chief and captain's office and a little interview room there. So that comprises the 3rd floor of the building. So, all right, with that, I'll leave it back to Joe. There is not, no.
Good, so just briefly, because we are, working on a timeline here, but this is that graph I mentioned about the project cost. And we spent a fair amount of time in the first informational meeting talking about that. But you really can see the spike as we hit COVID and the cost of projects that have essentially doubled since that period of time. And the challenges we had was we couldn't procure money fast enough with the increasing escalation of costs, and we were losing that battle dramatically. So that's why we went to bid docs. That's why we came to the voters of St. Johnsbury with a guaranteed maximum price from a construction management firm. And we can talk a little bit about that on the next slide, Chad. We'll talk a little bit about the components briefly. So the total construction is just under $8 million. And then the services, including, permitting, the remediation, the FF&E, legal, and owner contingency make up the other components that bring it up to just over 12.5. And Chris, if you want to maybe come up and talk a little bit about construction management and how that works for a community and how it can benefit, the town of St. Johnsbury as we move forward, that would be much appreciated. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Chris Yando, and I'm with Engelberg Construction. We're situated on the west side of the state, based out of Colchester. We also have an office in Concord, New Hampshire, and we work in both states. But we've been with the project now for about 3 years, where the town hired us to be the town's construction manager for the project. And what that means is we're in an open book, transparent contract with the town to work with the design team and other members of the team, the consultant team, to advise on construction and estimating. And throughout the course of the project, as the project grew in size, and I'm saying physical size, there's been many renditions of building estimates that we've done to help try to show the town in terms of what the price of the project is going to be. Finally, it was decided that with the police department's assistance, there was a great reduction in size of the project. And that's where the project had settled in terms of the size and the layout, as you saw before, reutilizing that existing building. Our next efforts have been to solicit subcontractors and vendors, and we solicited approximately 200 different contractors throughout the region to try to put together the best price for the town. So we've now received bids from approximately 25 different subcontractor trades, whether it be concrete and masonry and roofing and drywall, flooring, mechanical and electrical. We've assembled those prices. For the most part, we've met with those subcontractors that we're going to recommend to the town as soon as the bond vote passes. Our guaranteed maximum price contract is an open book process with the town. It is not a take it or leave it number. It is a number that's the summation of all the subcontractor bids that we received, including our management costs. In the end of the project, if the funds are not spent, for instance, we may have a certain allowance for something we don't totally understand yet. We may have that allowance in the contract value, and if we don't spend that value, that goes back to the town. So it is not a hard bid, take it or leave it situation. It is, again, a very transparent process. I will, in terms of my specific role within Engelbert Construction, is on the front end of projects. So I'm dealing with a lot of owners and clients right now, explaining the same thing in terms of projects, cost increases, subcontractor availability, labor availability, the supply chain of getting materials, all of it taking longer than we've ever had seen before. And I will just say from our experiences, if the project has to be rebid, it's my personal and company opinion that the cost will just continue to increase. So now we have a good set of subcontractors. Now is the time to get that team established after the bond vote. We will be ready to start construction as early as July to take over from the way it's sitting right now.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Okay, next slide, Chad. So this is a pretty busy slide, but really what it's showing you is, the total funding sources. So I'll go through this briefly. I mentioned them by name, but the EPA was $500,000. The Vermont Community Program was $330,000. The Vermont Brownfields Revitalization Fund was a $1.2 million grant. The revolving loan fund was a $162,000 grant and a $162,000 loan at 0% interest. And then, of course, I should also mention that we did receive congressional direct spending from Sanders' office that's through FEMA for $585,000, and we're currently working with NVDA on securing our revolving loan fund grant and loan at 0% to help augment this as well. And we'll also be working with the IRS for energy tax credits, and our estimate for those tax credits are $400,000 to offset the cost of the geothermal HVAC system that we're putting in. So that's the high level funding, and you've heard about the costs. And Chad, how about the next slide? We'll get to some of the nitty gritty. A little bit about the project timeline. Essentially we're looking at finishing up a remediation phase in July with one more mobilization that will be late July, early September. They'll be actually working, if the bond vote passes and we hit the ground running with Chris and a team of contractors, they will be working on the final two mobilizations with Costello this summer in order to have a really smooth transition from the remediation phase into the construction phase. And if I remember right, Chris, it looked like we would really see the construction phase likely go through till next November of 2026 and occupy the building in December of 2026. So it's actually a pretty aggressive timeline, and I think everybody's ready to hit the road running here if this does pass, so that we don't lose any time or effort, because as you know, what we've experienced, the time we lose sees escalation. So we want to lock in that guaranteed maximum price, and we want to move forward if that's the choice of the board. So Okay. Chad, you mentioned why it's important to be on Main Street. You know, this slide just highlights a couple high-level ones. I mentioned the historic significance of the building and a really important part of our town. You know, Chad mentioned the high visibility and location for the police and the quick response time. It also certainly repurposes an existing slum and blighted building right in the middle of our historic downtown core, which, whether we do this project or not, that is a town responsibility with that particular building. We do own that, and as I've mentioned, this challenges we've had, you know, about even thinking about demolition, those ended long ago. And historic preservation, you know, we worked really hard with them to mitigate and actually get the gymnasium torn down, and that was two pretty sizable efforts, because they do believe that, you know, maintaining the historical nature of our communities is really important. And I too agree with that too. And then I mentioned addressing the downtown brownfield. So go ahead, Chad, next slide. Unless you want to make any other comments there.
Agreed.
So just moving on, just to put things in context, and we actually had a really healthy discussion at the last meeting about costs. And I think that what I took from that meeting was that for the most part, we understand the need. You saw the pictures of the existing building. You haven't even heard from the fire folks, and you know, the integrity of the floor that holds up the apparatus is definitely in question. So there's a need. And then I researched similar projects in Vermont and New Hampshire and their recent costs and square footage. And so what I did was I just displayed this on this particular slide. You know, there was 4 projects in New Hampshire and 3 in Vermont. And when I basically just at a high level looked at the average cost per square foot for these projects, you know, the cost of construction was $710 a square foot. So that was just to put it into context. And then, of course, what everybody really wanted to hear was, you know, what's the impact on taxes? And I'll have to say this is very high level, but, you know, if we looked to borrow the money, right, the 12.5 million minus all the grants and everything, that's really about 9.2 million over 30 years at 4%, which we believe is reasonable for a municipality to achieve. You know, really, you're looking at $100 per $100,000 of value annually for an increase. And it's important to know that that's based on today's taxes and today's dollar value. And so I did the analysis. I tried to do the analysis just so that it was something to compare to if we went and found another property that was suitable and built a new facility based on the square footage of this existing facility, and you know, a couple of assumptions about property acquisition. There's the big unknown. My experience is that there seems to always be an element of environmental assessment and cleanup. We're an industrial community, and it seems like every project that we work on, there is that element. And so what, at a high level, we determined that a new facility, the same size, same everything, would be about $79 per 100,000 in value increase. So I think the message then becomes, you know, it's about $21 more per $100,000 to redevelop the Armory. If we're in agreement that we need a new facility in St. Johnsbury, and the size of the facility is about 8,300 square feet. So that was how I tried to boil it down to give somebody some comparison in those numbers. It is a big ask, we know that, and we desperately need new facilities, and that's just the reality, and I'm here just to try to present the facts, what we've done, what the options are, and then let the voters, you know, make that decision. And then really, I think Steve and Select Board, you know, that's really the time now to queue up, in my opinion, maybe some dialogue.
Yes. So the way we're going to proceed is I want to give people who have not expressed themselves at the first public hearing to have a chance to ask their questions, to try and spread it out so everyone will have a chance to speak, but we have to maintain decorum. And so raise your hand, I'll recognize you, and state your name so that, because we need that for the minutes, so Rachel could get it. And then come up and say your question or comment to us. So, yes.
Hi, Pete Governor. Usually not quite so clumsy. That's for this week. My comment is I'm really quite impressed with what you've shown tonight. I've got in the past 48 hours, I've gone from thinking, why not just bulldoze and start over somewhere else? And I am at this point pretty well convinced that this is the right direction. And I think that you have done your homework. Joe and others have done their homework, and it's my intention to vote for it.
Can I speak loudly, or do you want me to come up front?
You're good.
I'm good. Have three short related questions. Number one is, how urgent is the need for a new firehouse, and what's the timeline for it that you folks may have been considering? Number two is, what's your back of the envelope estimate for the cost of a new firehouse alone, and for the cost of a co-located firehouse and police station? And thirdly, can the Armory redevelopment project wait? And by the way, you made a good case for why we need a new police facility dispatch. If you don't feel comfortable answering the question about the urgency of the need for the firehouse, but there's a firefighter here or the chief or something, by all means, get them to speak to it.
So I'm going to let Joe answer first.
Yeah, so thanks, Lenny. The urgency is there for both. And you know, starting today, if we worked on the fire station, we're probably talking about a delivery of 3 to 5 years would be my estimate for a fire service facility. You know, the idea of locations is not that easy. Land's pretty scarce, and the land that is not scarce for a reason. So I would think that 2 to 3 years for assessment and environmental cleanup, and 2 years for construction for a fire facility.
And Joe, just to clarify, what would be the reason it wouldn't be, it would be available? You said that there's not available land, and what is, there's a reason.
Well, I think just because of contamination, you know, we know many of the projects, and we're working on some other projects in town. We're working at True Temper with that ownership on some assessment, and NVDA has paid in excess of $300,000 in assessment of that particular property. And the town has some EPA cleanup funding with hopes to redevelop that property. But, you know, these things, you know, are 2 or 3 years in the making, and maybe $1 million in assessment and cleanup. So I dare say that any of these sizable properties in our area here in close proximity to our downtown have probably either been a dry cleaner or a gas station at one point in time, unfortunately.
Or a flood area.
Or a flood area. To address the questions about cost, and I hope I have that with me for the combined facility. I think based on adding the square footage that the Armory is, along with the recent requirements from our fire chief, we're looking at about a 23,500 square foot combined facility. And if you multiply that by that $710 that we saw in Vermont and New Hampshire, you get about a $17 million project without acquisition, assessment, and cleanup. So, you know, you're probably talking about a $20 million project or more in today's dollars. So once again, if you look at the numbers separately and you use that 710 and multiply that by the fire chief's needs of 15,200 square feet and the Armory, that incremental cost to the taxpayer remains in that same ballpark of about $21 per $100,000 of value. So we think that it's pretty comparable, that the savings are not going to be millions and millions of dollars from what we're seeing in and around the area for facilities that size. I wish I had better comments to that, but it's just really expensive to build public safety facilities. And to David's point, policing requires very specialized type of buildings and rooms and access points. And we also thought it was really important as we spoke with our police chief and the changing of the way policing is being done to, one, have a room that we could use for training. We thought that was critical. And two, because of what we've been through with recent flooding and that room that Colin showed you where we had 5 state swiftwater teams in the same room with the town's teams, and everybody's trying to communicate with each other all at the same time. It was just chaos. And we believe that that need is significant, and St. Johnsbury really deserves a better facility for this.
Joe, could I ask, you said a fire station would require, alone, would require roughly 15,000 square feet?
I think he gave me 15,200.
Two, at $710 per square foot.
Correct.
Yep, I'm just checking, which would be like a $10.5 million project for a fire station alone.
Correct.
Do I have that right?
And then you add the Armory to that, right?
Oh, okay.
So you add the both independent together to compare it against the combined facility.
So that fire station and Armory project with police and dispatch would be like 22 million. Something like that.
Yeah, I think I had it at 23.
23. Okay. And then it was that last question. Okay.
Pardon me? Oh, can the Armory redevelopment wait?
Yeah, independent of it being police and dispatch, another Armory project. Do you have to do something with the Armory right away? Like, will the money revert? You know,
yeah, so Lenny, I do believe there is an element of urgency there. So I'll talk on both sides of this one. So one, the remediation really qualified for a fair amount of grants, right? And we've always looked to completing the remediation as a successful project unto itself. However, the funders do appreciate and many times require this development to go with their funding. So we would have to go back to the table with all of our funders. We would have to try to find another project that served the community, that the funders could buy into, and agree that would work for the town of St. Johnsbury. And many of the iterations that we talked about with the Friends of the Armory and all these things and the community groups that kept coming together to try to save this was about trying to develop a community center. But that's another town building and facility as well, that adds even maybe more expense to the town. And it didn't make sense. We contacted the YMCA, we tried to get input from them, and they just had no interest because they don't do anything in towns, as I was told, in less than 20,000 population base. There just wasn't enough horsepower for them to consider coming to St. Johnsbury. So, yeah, and like I said, we tried to sell it for, I think, 5 years for $1, and there was no takers. And probably our best bet in that term was that History and Heritage Center, but that PCB piece, you know, and a $3 million cleanup was just way too much for them to undertake, and that's too bad. But here we are, and this is the hand we're dealt, and now we just have to decide how to play that out.
And Joe, just a point of clarity as well. So if the bond vote fails, we don't find somebody to come in to take on the project, what does the town then face for that shell that's on?
Well, so it's a bit unknown, but as I've been told by our historic preservation consultant and through all the discussions with Vermont Historic Preservation, many of their strategies are to just mothball projects. Now, that is nothing we want to even really consider. I mean, there's no wall on the west side of that building. I think I'd like to see us committed to trying to repurpose it and trying to find an alternate use, but I can't tell you exactly what that means. I mean, I think it's a win that we've taken care of a horrible, you know, hazardous issue up there, and we ought to be proud of that. And I'm not sure what doors that opens and what doors that closes, but I think it's really important to know that when Kevin indicated that the EPA level is 1 part per million, and we have samples that were over 20,000 parts per million, that tells you that that was significant issue that we needed to address.
Stephanie.
So Joe and I are relative newcomers to St. Johnsbury, having come here in 1974, so it's only 50 years. But I know that this can has been kicked down the road for many, many years. I can't even keep track anymore. I think that based on the recent events in town that the police are responding to, and that we have the opportunity to do this now. I don't like to spend money more than anybody else in this room does, but I also know that we can't keep kicking the can down the road, and it's not going to get cheaper, and we need to have a good presence on Main Street. We can't just keep having this ugly building. We've got a golden opportunity here that I think we need to grasp.
Thank you. Yes, back.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mike Sullivan. I was at the last meeting, and a couple people approached me after the meeting, so I'm going to clarify with them.
I'm having a hard time here, I'm sorry.
I had a couple people approach me at the last meeting about some things that I said. One of them was that the village is the special service district in St. Johnsbury and makes up a grand total of 2 square miles of the town. And the special services provided in that area are the St. Johnsbury Police Department. Everybody outside that area, including me, is served by the state police. None of us outside the district pay for the cost of the police department, and this bond that the select board is putting forward is for monies out of the general fund. So I'm questioning how you intend to tax us for services that will never be provided and cannot be provided, especially when the town charter
which is the law in St. Johnsbury, according to the legislature, as approved by the legislature, specifically calls for you all to tax only village residents for select, can't think of the word. Special Police services. department services. It also says in there that I and everybody else outside the district has no right to vote on those costs or those services. So I don't know how you're going to do this and be in accordance with the law. That's my first question.
Okay. I also live outside the Special Services District. And it's not just the police, it's the dispatch, the call center. We are serviced by that who live outside. Also this summer, when we had flooding, like my road had to be closed because of covert, it was closed up. It was the Emergency Operations Center that was combining, was the one controlling that and stuff. So we do get...
Asking us for 30 years on that. I got your point, because other things. Doing something once a year, or twice a year, or once every 5 years doesn't justify this expense for me.
I have a different opinion.
Not even close.
No, I have a different opinion because I want my house and my road taken care of in an emergency. And that's only to that specific point. There's other reasons for it. So go ahead, please.
Okay. The warning, and you have been referring to this as a public safety building. I've been in municipal government as a manager for a good part of my career. And municipal public safety refers to a fire and police department facilities. A lot of times EMS as well. So you calling this a public safety building is deceitful to the voters of this town, I think. The loan information. So you're putting forth that you're going to get a bond bank note for 4%, which you can't just go to the bond bank and borrow money anytime you want. They have to have an offering. So you're putting forth the notion that you're going to get this loan, and I bet you're not. And if you got that one at that price, it would be $60,000 a month with $9 million in interest. So the total payback would be $21.5 million for this project. Other institutions right now that offer loans that you can go get are at 6+%. That would be $75,000 a month, $15 million in interest, and $27 million to pay back. Those are the numbers you should be sharing. Joe's cost comparison with other towns, Wolfburg, New Hampshire is a great comparison. Their project was for a public safety building, so not just police, and they're relatively the same size town, relatively the same poverty level, relatively the same income. They did their project for $438 a square foot. Another one on Joe's list was Swanton's, which is the only comparable project in Vermont, in my opinion. That's for fire and police for $655 a square foot. The piece that was left off of this is that their voters shot that project down by a margin of 4-1 as the most expensive safety complex in the state of Vermont. In St. Johnsbury, you guys are proposing $1,505 a square foot for only a police department. Almost 2.5 times one that was shot down by 4-1 margin. That's ridiculously overpriced. So I don't believe your warning is legal. I don't think you're in accordance with the charter. I think you ought to review. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Lauren Garvey.
Yeah.
And I just wanted a clarification on the diagram. It showed the building, it showed the parking area, it showed the restricted parking area for the officers, which presumably would be their cruisers and maybe their personal vehicles, when they drive to work.
I don't know how many spaces there were there. I don't know how many officers there are now. My understanding is that the police department is not fully staffed, so presumably there'll be more people coming in. And, you know, is that space adequate to accommodate what we have now and what we anticipate? And then the other parking, which I think is the public parking, which was on the north side next to the church, there's not much space there. I mean, maybe what I'm looking at now isn't what we'll be looking at when this project is complete, but it doesn't look like there's much parking there at all for the public either.
It looks like on the back, Laura, there's either 16 or 17 spaces that are in the back part of that. So between dispatchers, police officers that are on, plus we've got cruiser storage. My sense is that that's adequate. I think our roster for our police department is 13 officers. We've got about 4 vacancies right now. Looking at them starting to fill back up. But you generally, the most on your busiest day, the chief's in, the detective's in, and you get 2 officers, you got 4 police officers, and then you'll have 3 to 4 dispatchers. And so then when you leave the cruisers that aren't being used at the time, I think that would be adequate. There's 4 spaces on the side, including 1 handicap space for the general public, but there's also on-street parking in front. You don't get a lot of walk-in traffic into police and dispatch, but you do have fingerprint appointments. So we do all the fingerprinting for the schools, all the sports programs, all that kind of stuff. So they are in close proximity, walkable proximity to the municipal parking lot right now, but parking's a challenge, and we know that just overall parking up on Main Street is something that we gotta be planning on as things continue to develop up there.
So there's not really any space for additional parking on this site, which actually makes me feel comfortable because from time to time, it seems like there's this little murmur about should we be expanding or should the town be expanding the police department to cover the entire town and not just the special services district. That would require additional staff, would require additional cruisers. We live in a place to park, so we won't ever have to do that. So that's good.
Thank you, Laura. Yes.
My name is Tom Trigg. First of all, thank you for doing everything you've done. I did a small apartment in a barn 2 years ago, and that was 700 square feet, and this is overwhelming, so thank you. When we thought about doing that project 3 years ago, the cost of a 2x4 was $9.50, and then it dropped back down to $2.60 for an 8-foot 2x4, so we decided to proceed. I know costs came down a lot. It went up, material costs went up a lot because of supply and demand, and then they came back down. But nowhere does this seem to reflect any of the drop. Is there something I'm missing about these costs going up like that and not rebounding from the supply and demand? I'm not challenging any, I'm trying to understand.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you say that, and it is hard for me to even understand that because I hear that, and Chris, you can chime in too, but the realities are the cost to build, right? I know for a fact, because I'm in that process, have doubled, and I'm still experiencing that. So we're pointing at this 2x4 or something, but you know, as I understand it, like mechanical stuff, HVAC, that has not bounced back like lumber has. Is that an accurate statement?
That is a very true statement, and yours is a very true statement as well. I experience it in my own do-it-yourself projects that simple 2x4s have gone back down, but there are other commodities in the lumber business that have not gone back down. Sheet goods have not gone back down as much. However, the cost of construction is not just those materials. It's the cost of labor, it's the cost of resources, the cost of running a business. And what we're finding is that the cost to keep labor within a company, retirement, or the training costs, those have continued to rise, and those contractors, and I'm not trying to blame anyone, but mechanical, electrical, those companies that have technical needs in their labor skilled forces are having to pay a lot more for their labor than the other companies. Folks are also jumping from one company to the next for continued raises. You know, from one subcontractor to another, they're poaching people. And the way they're doing that is by offering them more money. And so that gets passed down to us as consumers. So you are correct in your 2x4 example, but there is much more to the cost of construction than we've experienced.
I understand my perspective is very limited, and thank you for the explanation. That does make sense. My other question is, in a letter to the editor, there was a proposal or a suggestion that, you know, we're going to need a fire department renovation down the road. Why aren't we looking at the big picture? So you've made an excellent case for why we need to do the police project now. I get it, Stephanie, you spoke to it admirably. What is the projection, what is the plan for the town to deal with the fire issue later? Because what I fear is that those of us that may vote for this bond 4 years from now may get hit with we need another $15 million to do the fire. So what does the future look like for the fire department? Do we have anything? Do you have anything?
Well, I guess my only answer is we need both, right? We see what other communities are paying. We can assume that that's what this town is going to have to pay if you're going to size a facility for our population and our needs. And that's what we tried to put together in a high-level comparison so that you could see that incremental difference of the new facility versus the two independent facilities, right? So ultimately, the two facilities are 23,000 square feet, right? Or they're 8,330 and 15,200. And then it's just trying to determine the incremental increase it costs us to do it that way. And that's what we're trying to say. So the answer is, if this town needs a new fire station and if this town needs a new police station, that is coming.
Yeah. So assuming that the bond passes and this police station goes through and it all makes perfect sense, what are we looking at in 5 years when we need a new fire station? Would we renovate what's there, or would there be another search for property and building a whole new facility? Is there a plan?
Exactly what you're saying is what we're starting to do right now.
Okay.
We're assessing potential locations based on some previous feasibility studies, and we're looking at our options. And we know that it's time to start addressing it.
Okay.
Start talking about it and getting that clock ticking as well.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Ellensburg. Yeah, I have some concerns about the public safety building. A public safety building truly is a fire rescue and facilities in that facility. So these new facilities that we get now are really not comparable. So I would like the select board to really look at maybe a new property building, a public safety building. I'm just throwing this out, the vacant property in Hastings Hill. Yeah, I think you really need to go back to the drawing board here. And maybe apparently should be renovated into office buildings that the town can generate some income. I just think you really need to go back to the drawing board on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Lynn.
My name is Lynn Wirtz. A few questions. The description of the projects has the HVAC geothermal component. So is that the waste heat thermal system that's being put in, that's going to be connected to other buildings, and how would that connect the building? Would that be heating the building?
Yeah, so that's actually something we're working in parallel to identify ways to also find added revenue sources. So we're talking about the very early stages of the discussion about a geothermal network that we could capitalize on some of this infrastructure we're putting in for the Armory. Some back of the napkin showed that it's possible that the town could benefit somewhere in the vicinity of $200,000 to $250,000 if we expanded to share some of that infrastructure. But it's pretty early, so we didn't include that in any of the numbers to try to reduce the cost. And, you know, as I talk with the team and we try to identify, you know, if we went with the geothermal, you know, it has a longer term, you know, payback from an operational point of view, maintenance point of view. But if we had to pull it because we had to go, you know, air to water, then what we give up on the tax credits that was included in that funding stack, we would reduce in the cost of that HVAC system. And as I've been told, it would net out if we had to make that decision to get away from the geothermal. I think the wells in that budget were $450,000 and the tax credits were $400,000. So they were, the way we've discussed it is they would cancel each other out. Is that correct, David?
Yeah, I think that's essentially the case.
Thanks for the question, quick. I didn't come to the first information meeting. I know a lot of people out there who like trying to decide how to vote want to know, did you look at every empty lot in town and decide if there's anything that a combined, you know, fire and police system could be on and make it cheap? Is it cheaper to combine them or to be the same total by doing two separate? And then my other question is, if this bond doesn't go through, what happens? Like, we just sit around and for the next 5 years try and do something different or what?
So I'm going to answer the first question, and Chad, you can chime in too. So I think we did a feasibility study that included 5 properties around town. You know, we're always looking, we're always investigating the options, but essentially this is the one, the lens I looked at it was the Armory's our problem and there's a number there associated with dealing with it and a liability to the town. So the way I looked at it was whatever else we decided to do, we still have the Armory, right? And we have an obligation to do something with it. So maybe people won't agree with me on that, but if this project over here costs $15 million and that's 3, I look at it like it's $18 million to the town of St. John's ready to deal with this. And so when I looked at it and thought we could basically kill 2 birds with 1 stone and maybe have the incremental cost to the taxpayer be not that much, that would be in the best interest of the town. But of course, I'm just trying to present that for the town's taxpayers to make that decision. And yeah, I mean, I constantly review and look at properties around town for many different reasons. And I can't say that there is some golden property that is just there that we're gonna not have to pay a lot of money for and not have to clean up. So I don't really wish I had an answer that, yeah, we have something in our back pocket and somebody to take over the Armory.
Have you looked at the property on Hastings Hill?
Well, you know, the development fund owns that, and they do have plans already in place for housing units there. So we would have to buy it from them.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that was actually one of the ARPA transformational projects, I think, to help the St. J Development Fund attract housing development there. And I know they're continuing to work on that. We're hopeful that...
Yeah, you know, what a 50 unit down there.
Yeah, and so I can go, so at the beginning of this project, Dave came on really early, it was probably 5 years ago. And so we were looking at public safety in general and what we need for facilities. So this, and that report is public, so nothing that I say here is but the locations looked where we did a spatial analysis for what the needs are for police, fire. So how many square foot do they need? What kind of buildings do they have to have? Everything that we looked at for existing buildings couldn't house the fire department, so we kind of boiled down to we need to build a new facility, unless we all of a sudden found this miracle building that could house the firehouse, which wasn't going to happen. So we looked at a combined facility. We had a couple different lots in town. One's on Portland Street that we looked at for a combined facility. We looked at the McDonald's lot. We would have to acquire where the Merchants Bank is as well in order to make that one fit. We looked at renovating, actually partnering with and renovating the Republican block for moving in just the police station there. Both these lots here, the one in here and the one on Portland Street, were looked at as a combined facility, but they're also looked at, what if we just built just a firehouse there? And then we looked at renovating 1187, so the current fire station, renovating that as a police station, and then the final one was we looked at the Armory. And we had to spend a lot of time, Joe and I sat talking about it for quite a bit of time before we brought it to the select board at the time, and we talked about we're recommending moving forward with the Armory part of the project, and it was for all the reasons that we've discussed here, because all of those evaluations were all evaluations on construction, and it was construction costs back then. We didn't know what we would run into for environmental issues. We knew that there was an environmental liability for the town with the Armory that we're going to have to address at some point anyway. And then we didn't know what purchase prices were going to be for any of those properties. And so we didn't, as Joe touched on before, our primary reason when we were doing this at the time, we had tenants on the floor, and so on the second floor, and we're hoping we keep them in there. We're still hoping to have tenants on that part of the building, but being the welcome center and being our front end place, having the police department trying to bring people in, bringing them upstairs through the welcome center to try to process them, just didn't seem like it was really a good fit. Yeah, there's an elevator here, but.
None of the other doors access the elevator.
Well, we also have the town clerk's office right here too, so there's a lot of public.
It certainly sounds like you've done your due diligence. What about the True Temper property? The town is in the process of acquiring that, and I know it's got brownfield issues, and that would be a while, but that's a big lot.
Yeah, so, it's hard to talk about other people's properties who own it, in public meetings and dreams about what you might do with someone else's property. And I always find myself to be very careful when an owner reads in the paper what Joe said last night about their property, because that usually causes some real issues. But I will say that I have been in discussions, and we have been working with NVDA and the developer, and we're also looking at a potential housing project if the stars align properly. The mandate that we're getting from the state and the housing, and so I should also mention, the pressure this financial pressure is on the existing tax base. I think everybody in this room, in this community, needs to know how hard we're working at trying to create other revenue streams, grow our brand list, attract people to move here and work here, and those are all the things that will drive the cost of these things down. But many of these things we need to invest in order to attract people to come to our community. And so that's really the chicken and the egg stuff. It's a time of investment from my perspective. I know that's really difficult and financial pressure is really strong, but this is the reality and I think the opportunity for us. So that's why we're focusing on some housing projects to meet the demand. Right now we've got EHV bringing on 70 new people with their $44 million expansion. We've got NVRH growing with their $30 million West Wing project. They always have about 30 to 60 FTEs available. Many times when I worked at NVDA before, it was how do we attract a business and then build housing. Right now we have the businesses growing, and now our problem is building housing and then building the infrastructure to support the things that we really need here in this community. And that's the position we're in. But I think it's essential that everybody know that growing revenue is a priority. We know the financial pressures, But we do also have this timing issue with some of these delicate projects that need to be addressed, and so that'll be up to the voters.
I'm just going to say, I'm glad I came tonight. I feel completely confident that you all have done your due diligence, and the fact that you're residents here and feel whatever pain we're going to feel is, well, misery loves company. But no, realistically, you know, you're not flying in from California, dealing with this and then going back to California. You live here, and I'm satisfied that you've done your diligence, and thank you.
Well, yes. How are you? My name is Steve. In December, I bought the property across from the fire department at 1214 Main. Javier Bills is there now. I'm in the process of renovating the 4 apartments above. So a couple statements here. See, Creston is online there. I do want to say the inspector, the fire marshal, those people helping me, outstanding. I mean, I walked into Creston's office today not thinking he could talk to me, and he talked to me for 20 minutes and helped me out. So that's one separate issue. The other issue is from my apartments that I'm renovating right now, I can see the fire department, I can see the police department, and it's old. It's just old. And the question going forward for me is, look, it's 2025. Is it going to meet the needs of what happens in 2035? It won't today. It doesn't look like it will today. And so my question, I apologize for walking in late, I hope I'm in the right meeting. What's the individual cost to me as a taxpayer a year? Is it $160 a year? Is it $200 a year?
So earlier we went over just a high level estimate based on today's tax rate, today's dollars, and today's grand list value. And we determined that it would be approximately $100 per $100,000 value for the Armory redevelopment versus about a $79 increase per $100,000 value for a new facility of the same size.
All right, because I went to public school. So I need, literally what I'm asking is it going to raise my tax bill $200 a year?
If you had a $200,000 piece of property, in round numbers, everything being equal, yes.
Okay. Okay. Look, all I can tell you is I look out at that building. I'm new. I live in California.
No offense, man.
It's okay, because my son opened up that restaurant, and we will be moving out here. Yeah. But I do want to say, look, going forward, you have to invest in the community because you have to create a destination for this city. And if you don't, it will decay, and people like me, I mean, I'm investing a great deal of income trying to get that so it actually looks like Main Street, it operates like Main Street, and we attract more businesses. I want more restaurants on that street, I want more businesses. I would like some tech to come in here. But guess what, if you don't have the housing, it's not going to happen. So I can't vote here, so I'm not going to give an opinion, but I will tell you, as a property owner, and believe me, I pay taxes here, I love this town, and you guys have helped me a great deal. Thanks.
But you're a taxpayer, so your voice is important.
Sure, but I can't vote, so look, I don't. No, look, I love this town. Make no mistake, and I will tell you.
$100,000, right? But you've also got the fire engine coming, and that's going to add to it, and you're going to have stuff before you know it. It's going to be way up there on people and stuff there. I mean, we go for affordable housing so much, but you forget about affordable taxes in this town. And you're going to tax people out of here. I don't know what you're going to do when you start collecting on people that can't afford to pay their taxes anymore. But it's going to happen because you just have too many big dreams up there and doing it and stuff. Like I said, you could find places that could do it and save some money and not build these extravagant buildings you want and save. I mean, you're saving the Armory, great, have it cleaned up. You paid for that already, I take it. That's all done, right?
It's not, it's about 85%.
85% done and stuff there. You could close that off in the parking lot back there. you can move the police up here, and then you'd have room, and if you have another disaster, and you need emergency management to have a bigger room for everybody, you've got this, or you have school buildings, big active up, and that's another thing, is taxes on the town, the school taxes are gonna go way up too, because they have all kinds of designs. Before you know it, you're paying, mine went up $1,000. What are you gonna do next this year? You're gonna have to go another $1,000 and stuff there? It's getting ridiculous. You live in this town, pay taxes?
I do not.
No. You do, you feel the price, don't you?
Yeah, but I also think there's wisdom to building the features that the town
That's
needs.
good, he wants to have a nice income. I do not have that.
No, I'm
retired, and stuff, I like to retire too, and I can see this going right at it and stuff there. Before you know, people will be paying like New Jersey taxes, where a little building here in a house, and they'll be paying $20,000 a year for it and stuff there. That's what, and I know my brother lived down there and stuff, I know what it was. The little postage stamp, you look off and stuff there, and you're going that way and stuff there. I don't think it's affordable.
Well, one thing, all the housing that's being developed and that we invested in our ARPA fund is, well, most of it is market rate housing, so it's not subsidized housing for low income. And you just, let's say we build, 200, 300 more housing units, that's 200, 300 more units on the grand list. So then our share per 100,000 goes down because the grand list has grown.
Goes up because then you need more for the schools, you need more for.
We don't have anything to do with the.
It all goes that way and stuff. And if you're investing in a thing there, why is the town putting all that money into this affordable housing and stuff? $2,000 a month is not an affordable apartment. Well, at least you should be able to build a house for that.
For $2,000?
A month? Yeah. Well, what would that be in a mortgage? You have to pay $250,000, $300,000. And the interest on your loans here, you're already at $250,000 a year now on these loans that you're taking. 4% is what? Of $1 million is what? 40,000? And you got 3 million over?
Yep.
Just on that?
Yes, sir.
I didn't really hear any answers to Mike Sullivan's statement. Have you folks researched this to see if you are doing it legally?
Yes.
You have?
And the town attorney, so.
Okay, and so we're not allowed to vote on this? We don't live in town?
You do, you can. Yeah, all residents of the town of St. John's Creek are right to vote on this.
According to the
charter. The paper services we'll never get.
We're paying for protection of the.
See, can I clear this up? It's cool, town clerk. Sorry. I've been asked this question 100 times since the bond vote came out. It doesn't matter what's in that building. It doesn't matter if it's a fire station, a police station, a rec center. It does not matter. The building is owned by the town of St. Johnsbury, which automatically makes it part of the general fund. Yes, the police department will be in that building, but so won't the dispatch center. And our dispatch center is a regional dispatch center, which we take money in from other towns to do dispatching for them. So just because the police department's in there does not make it a special service building. Any building in this town is paid for by the general fund. So everybody pays towards buildings in the town. It does not matter what is in them. So that's why everybody votes on this, because everybody who pays general fund taxes pays for that building. They pay for 1187 Main Street. They pay for this building. They pay for Western Ave. They pay for the highway department. That's why it's that way. And it's not just because it's the police department that dispatches in there, but the building is owned by the town.
Well, the charter says that the villages be taxed amount sufficient to pay off current expenses and indebtedness and continuing the present functions and additions thereto within that area that are not common to the town of St. John's.
This
So I don't know how
building
you
is
can
in,
make me pay for police that don't serve me.
the building, you pay for the building.
It's a police department.
You're paying for the building.
It's a police department.
And it's
Okay,
just
sir, we have,
If you want to build, if you want to have a service center.
Sir, you are not recognized to speak. Lenny has the floor.
She was speaking to my comment.
Lenny, go ahead.
Yeah, Lenny's ready. Just looking
There's
for
no way to yell at me.
a point of clarification from Stacy. My recollection is that when we have had bonds for like pumps at the wastewater treatment facility or the water treatment plant, things like that, and we all vote on them, my understanding was that the payment of debt on those bonds was not shouldered, it was not general fund, it was paid out of the user fees of the people that use the sewer line or the water. Is that true?
That is true, and the reason everybody gets to vote on that is because if the water and sewer go defunct, default, the town is responsible for those buildings and the maintenance and everything that's in them.
Right, so understood. But in this case, and they're town-owned. Okay, in this case, facility's going to be town-owned, okay? But the general fund will be servicing the bond. And I'm just curious as to why there's a difference between us not, the general fund not servicing the bond on those other things, you know, water and sewer, but servicing the bond on this facility. That's all.
Water and sewer are enterprise funds, so ultimately they're paid through the enterprise funds, unless they cannot pay for themselves. If they cannot pay for themselves, at that point, then the town pays over.
Steve, I just have a quick question. Does the town dispatch office dispatch Alex?
Yeah.
Okay, so every single person in the room is benefiting from having an ambulance service dispatch through that facility.
Empire, yeah. Any other questions, comments?
Could I ask one final one, if there's nobody else?
Yeah, sure.
Is it essential that police and dispatch be co-housed? One of the things we're looking for potentially is a solution to the armory problem, okay? And killing multiple birds with one stone, on the one hand. On the other hand, looking at the benefits of co-locating fire and police. So, is there, and of course my concern when I asked initially is, gee, if we're going to be building both over the course of the next 6-7 years, will we be paying more doing them separately than if we do them together? In the interest of solving the problem in the armory, is it possible potentially just to move dispatch to the armory in some scale down project and look for other alternative uses, community center, whatever? Obviously, we've already gotten the money on the remediation of the project. That's basically not cost the town anything, virtually nothing. So that part's done. So now is the creative thinking on the next steps. Maybe dispatch only in the armory and a basketball court. I don't know.
So I can answer that question. We have a system that we use to dispatch along with the police department, and there's a lot of state and FBI protocols that go with that. And when you separate the two, you're escalating the requirements, the restrictions, and the security measures that you're having to deal with by dealing with multiple locations instead of the same location. The access control part alone is a significant amount with locking down those buildings and securing them from outside entities and outside people.
We have a motion to adjourn the special public meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. No, okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. We are adjourned. We'll take a 5-minute break before we start the select board meeting. Thank you everyone for coming out. Any questions? Right up. Thank you.